Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for another episode, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for listening and for continuing to spread the word about this podcast to others. We are approaching the 1-year mark, and we're very grateful for all of your guys' continued support. Thank you so much. Today's topic is going to be about getting good players to become great players. I know so often we focus on trying to get our players to the point where they're good. And I've heard a lot of coaches even say that the transition from getting a player from average to good is so much easier than trying to get a player from good to great. So today, that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss how to get that good player to be even greater. We're going to approach this from both a physical basketball, sort of that X's and O's standpoint, and also the mental standpoint to hopefully help you take your good player that you currently have and get them up to that next level. To help share their insight on this topic, I'm very happy to be joined today by Associate Head Boys Basketball Coach at Fairfield Prep. Coach Garrett Hickey is joining us today. Coach, thank you so much. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to jump on. I'm excited to talk some basketball and talk some hoops. So thanks again.
Awesome. Excited to have you here, Coach. Let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Where's the game taken you, and what have been the kind of steps along the way on the way to Fairfield?
Sure. So I by no means was a very good basketball player growing up. I played at the JV level in high school, and that's as far as I got. And I always had kind of a love for the game. And, you know, went to college, did undergrad. And when I graduated from college, my mom was a principal, and her school needed a volunteer coach for the basketball team. So, you know, I was home, I wasn't doing anything, so I figured I would, you know, help my mom out and do that. And I kind of fell in love with it then. And so when I went to get my master's in education, I was working at a middle school here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and the basketball coach there was actually a former Division II head coach. And he did a really great thing with the kids. His name was Larry Menta. He coached at Southern Connecticut for a while, but there was a middle school schedule where we played like 70 games. We made sure those kids were off the streets on the weekends, and we drove them all these different places. And I learned a lot, obviously, from the X's and O's standpoint of basketball, but I think I learned a ton more just about like the dedication and like the love that you have to have like for players. And if you have that, like the bond and the relationship that you get. And it was awesome. And a lot of those kids now a couple of them are playing in college, which is really cool to kind of watch their journey go. And from there, I was just really lucky that at the same school, there was an assistant coach at the high school level who allowed me to kind of just jump in and help out with their practices and things like that. And I got even more lucky at the end of that season because the head coach at Albertus Madness was recruiting one of the seniors at the high school that I was helping out at. And that summer, one of his assistant spots opened up, and I just obviously met him through, you know, him coming to watch the player play. And, you know, I applied to that position, and that's how I ended up at Albertus Madness, which is it's a D3 school in New Haven, Connecticut. It's one of the top D3 programs in the country. When I was going in, they had won multiple conference championships, and they had at the time that I went in, I think they had the longest home winning streak in NCAA basketball throughout the divisions. So I was just really lucky that I got to, you know, experience that as a new coach. And I was there for 2 years. We won a GNAC championship, which was an awesome experience. And from there, I live in Fairfield, Connecticut. So the job opened up at Fairfield Prep, which is a great school in Connecticut. It's in Division I for basketball. And I made the jump down there, and that's where I've been for the last 4 years now. So that's kind of my journey. Yeah.
Awesome. And let me ask you about that transition from going from the D3 school that you were at and now going, kind of back to the high school ranks when you did that a few years ago. Was that a difficult transition? Was that easy transition? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was difficult, but it's different when, especially at the D3 level, when you have players, they're making the choice and the decision to go to school and play basketball. Mm-hmm. Where in high school, kids, not that they don't take it seriously, but some kids are playing sports because that's their social experience during their high school career. And so I think if anything, it was just making the adjustment of like, there were going to be some kids who might not take it as seriously as kids in college did. So I think that was kind of the only adjustment. But other than that, I'm big on coaching is all about relationships. And so having relationships with, your players in college level, at the high school level, it was kind of all the same. The conversations were a little different just because the kids were a little bit more mature at the college level. But for that, it really wasn't that much of an adjustment. And I kid, because I think that it's for some reason or whatever it is, you show up and someone says, "Oh, here's Coach Hickey. He coached in college," and 15-year-old kids are like, "Whoa!" Like they just don't realize, it is a big deal, but they don't realize, that there are how many schools are out there and how many people are actually college coaches. I think that the minute they hear, "Oh, college coach," they're, especially in Connecticut, "Oh, UConn." Oh, it's like, no, there's other schools out there and there's other divisions and there's, opportunities because, I by no means, I told my kids all the time, I by no means was qualified when I was given my chance to coach at the college level. And I think that players need to understand that, they might not be confident in where they are, but that they can play. There's spots out there if they want to play basketball.
Yeah, and that translates with playing and with coaching as well. It sounds like good advice. Like you may get that position open to you and you might not feel ready for it, but sometimes you almost never feel ready for it and you almost have to kind of jump in and just see what happens. And a lot of good things can come from that for sure. So no, that's awesome. Besides coaching, I know that you have some other things that you're involved in too. So before we get into our topic, there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you about that I saw on your Twitter byline there. I wanted you to spend some time talking about Fast Model and being the founder of, I saw this hashtag, it was called Share the Game. So can you speak about the contributions that you make and what Fast Model is, and then also what is Share the Game as well?
Sure. Yeah. So Fast Model is a great program that's out there that it allows you to organize all of your personal plays that you might have for your program. It's also a great way if you have an account with Fast Model that you can kind of just share plays among other coaches who have the same accounts that are out there. So being a Fast Model contributor, it basically just means that if during the NCAA tournament, we were, drawing plays up live and posting it on Twitter and then also on the Fast Model website. And then that way coaches can go in afterwards and they can add plays to their play library. But before I had Fast Model, I was, my wife would yell at me because there'd be pieces of paper all over the place that had plays drawn up on it. And there was not a lot of organization to it. It was just kind of a bunch of pieces of paper. And then when I got Fast Model, I was able to put it's all in one little library on the app on my computer. So it's a great thing for me to stay organized, but it's also, I think, a very good way to collaborate with other coaches who are out there, because you can send plays right in the app. You can send it to people, and the app that's on the iPad, it allows you to draw plays up very quickly. I use it all the time to live scout games. For our opponents, in high school, I'll watch, a game I'll have there and be able to draw it up. And for me personally, drawing up plays like pen and pencil, if you make a mistake, then you got to go back or cross it out, and then you got to try to remember what you saw. And so having it right in front of you and being able to do it very easily is awesome. And so I'm a big believer in them and big supporter of them. And then something that more recently that happened for me is just during quarantine, I think everyone was just trying to find something to stay busy. And so I started this, my biggest thing is I wanted to, learn from other coaches, and I wanted other coaches to be able to like see some of the stuff that I had. And so I just kind of started this hashtag on Twitter, share the game. And then I started my own blog, and the blog is by no means like a soapbox blog. Like, I don't write my opinions on there about anything. It's a way for me to share some of the drills that I have, or the X's and O's that I have, or some of the philosophies that I've come kind of to put together along the way. And my biggest thing is always just asking for other people's opinions, and other people's, perspective on some of the stuff that I have. And so, like, just recently, last week, I finished up my, tweaking a little bit of my coaching portfolio, and I sent it out to like over 285 coaches who wanted to look at it. And I got a bunch of emails back from other people's portfolios. And I've been, there's like 4 or 5 people who I've been kind of collaborating back and forth with via email just about our portfolios. And that's pretty much all it is. It's a way for coaches to connect. And I think that's one of the positive things that came out of, quarantine and being at home during this COVID thing is, the basketball coaching community on social media everywhere is just, it's strong. People are willing to like jump on a phone call and just talk to you for 30 minutes, or jump on, shoot someone an email and they'll respond. And you don't necessarily, like, beforehand, I never would have thought that, but there was like a couple times during COVID that, I was on a clinic online, and there was a D1 coach, and they said, here's my email, shoot me a question or anything you have. And we can talk about it. And like, I tried it, and I would get like a response back, and I was like, wow, I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
This was actually something that like people could do. And so I started that. It's great. I'm trying to build it as much as possible. And my biggest thing is like, everything's free. It's not anything I'm trying to make money off of or anything like that. It's just being able to share stuff. And because everybody has valuable things and things that they could bring to the table, or a different perspective. And I think it's really important to have a space where all that can kind of come together.
And I know, speaking from a personal standpoint, and I'm sure there's other coaches listening who agree, I get so much out of just having conversations with people and being able to just discuss the game with an actual person, whether it's virtual or in person. And I think that there's so much out there, and this too, there's so much out there of like videos and clinics and all these other things that kind of lack that like personal connection. And it's no fault of anybody, that's just how they're designed. And I think it's just so important to have somebody that you can shoot an email to, or somebody who you can just correspond with. And I'm sure it's just helping make coaches just that much better. And I really like that too. And I also really like that we seem to have really moved past, coaches like keeping all their secrets to themselves or not wanting to get it out there. I feel like now more than ever, coaches are more willing to just share stuff. Like, they have nothing to hide. They just want the game to get better. And I think that that's awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's, I think especially now with technology, it's, you can, if you have a Synergy account, you can watch every single basketball game that happened like in the NCAA for men's and women. So it's not like you're going to hide any of your secret plays. Like, you can go out there and find them. So I think that's great. And I love the fact that at least from my perspective, during COVID, it was great to have like actual conversation, like not text, not like having a conversation like you and I are having right now. Because I think with technology and the way the world is so busy, we kind of lose sight of having those conversations and being able to like actually listen to someone and be a sponge and soak up all the knowledge that they have.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. Absolutely. So with our topic about getting good players to be great players, let's kind of start with what your definition is, Coach, of that. So if you were to look on the court and you would say, all right, that player's a good player, but that player right there, that is a great player. In your mind, where's the distinction? What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's definitely, for me, the biggest thing is like, I think the word great gets used a lot. And sometimes it's like overused. And I think that's no fault from anybody else. But so for me, it's like, if we're going to overuse it and not limit like it to like players who actually are like great, like LeBron James, great, right? Like if you call LeBron James great and then you go walk into an AAU tournament and you call an 8th grader great, you're kind of diminishing the word of great, right? So for me, it's very important to understand that like every individual person has like their level of like great. And so, you know, there's good and there's great for individual players, and they, in order to get there, it's a lot of the onus has to be on like them. And so if I walked into a gym and like I'm like, oh, that player's great, it basically for me it's I guess it's the cliche intangibles that they have. Like if they're not playing and they're on the bench, they're engaged and they're being a cheerleader for their teammates. Or if they're on the floor, you know, they make the plays that like other kids aren't making, right? So it's not like, oh, that kid just went 5 for 8 from 3-point line. All right. It's like, you know, instead of trying to go one-on-one, it's making like all the correct passes. And on defense, it's like making the right rotations or beating guys to spots or communicating with them. So it's the things that I would say don't come natural. Like if you just rolled the ball out in the court and said play pickup, the majority of the kids who are playing wouldn't be doing that stuff. I think those are in the great category. And the good stuff is you know, the stuff that you would kind of see in that pickup atmosphere or something like that.
And so when we're thinking about, you know, things that don't come natural, as a coach, are you going to maybe like tell all of your players like, hey, like, you know, all of you have the ability to, you know, do X, Y, and Z to get yourself to that next level? Are there some players who you think are maybe more ready to make that step, or players you think like you're not ready to even be like thinking about that stuff yet because we got to get you at a certain level? How do you decide like who is ready to really hear that message of like, all right, here's what we're going to do to get you to become great?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction to make. I think as coaches, one of the biggest mistakes that we make is kind of lumping your whole team together and thinking that all 15 or 17 kids on the team can do the same thing that you're working on. I think it's really important as coaches to understand that there are kids who are going to be more naturally talented or naturally gifted in their athleticism or their basketball IQ just from their experience. And so there might be maybe just 2 kids on your team who can really do, you know, one thing really well, you know, and maybe it's not for everybody else. And so that's my biggest thing is understanding, all right, you know, Johnny over there is 100% our most talented kid. He's our most athletic kid. His level of greatness is probably the highest on the team. Like his ability or where he can get to as a player while he's in our program is like the highest. And so you have to recognize that, and then you have to push that individual kid to that mark. But you can't take the number 17 guy on the roster and say he should get to the same spot as Johnny, because that's not fair to either of those two guys. So there's nothing wrong with looking at, you know, the number 15 player on the team and saying, all right, his level of greatness, if we could get, you know, by the time he's a junior or a senior, if we could get 5 to 7 minutes of like solid defense, doesn't turn the ball over, you know, is a leader on the floor. If we can get him there in our program, that's his level of greatness. He'd be a great player for us. And then, you know, Johnny, who's the best kid, we need Johnny. His level of greatness needs to be, okay, he needs to score 18 to 22 points a game. He needs to try and get, you know, double-digit boards. He needs to distribute the ball and get, you know, 6 to 7 assists a game if he can. So it's understanding that you can have different levels and still, you know, say like that kid's great. I think we tend to ignore those other kids and be like, oh, that kid's not that good. Like he's only going to give us 5 minutes. Like let's turn that into a positive. Let's say, hey, if he can get us 5 minutes, that's great for us and that's great for him. And I think that's a really important thing. It's something that, and I'm not perfect. Like it's hard to do because you have a level and you want to give everyone and want to have high expectations for everybody. But I think for me, the biggest mistake that I make sometimes is, you know, I'll get just as frustrated at the best player on the team, and I'll get frustrated for the same mistake that kid made than, you know, the number 15 kid on the team. And maybe the number 15 kid just isn't there yet. He can't make that play. And me getting frustrated at the kid is just making the kid more frustrated all along.
Yeah, it's tricky for me too when I see, certain mistakes made by players on my team, and it's hard to, take a step back and think like, okay, is that a mistake that, I can live with because of where they're at versus like where my expectations are for another player. So no, I don't think you're alone in that. That's real tricky waters to navigate for sure. And are you having conversations with your players about that, like at the beginning of the season, saying like, hey, this is where I see where you're at, and this is where you need to be in order to become great, even if it is just 5 minutes of playing time? Or how do you kind of let players know almost like where they should be aiming to get to?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the hardest conversation that you have to have with the kid, but I think it's also the most important and the most valuable. My biggest thing, it's like, especially that like sophomore to junior or junior to senior jump when it's like they show up to tryouts and they went from playing maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and now all of a sudden they think, okay, I should be starting or getting like, probably close to like playing the whole game or whatever. And they don't realize that you can't just make that jump. Like, it doesn't just happen. And it's like, and especially game from game, a lot of times players put so much pressure on themselves because maybe like game one, they'll go in and they'll play 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and they get so down on themselves because I only played 2 minutes. It's like, no. What did you do like within the 2 minutes? I know you're not happy. Like, we don't have to be happy that you played 2 minutes. And it's not natural to be happy only playing 2 minutes. Everyone wants to play. But it's like, you need to have the right mindset and go forward and say, okay, what did you do in those 2 minutes? What could you have done better? Mm-hmm. And then what the biggest thing I think is, and the part of the conversation that gets missed a lot, is game number 2, you're not going to walk into the gym and now all of a sudden play 28 minutes. Like, nothing. It's never going to happen unless, you know what I mean? Like, unless the whole team, 4 guys and the 3 guys that come off the bench all get injured in layup lines. You're not going to go from playing 2 minutes to 28 minutes. So I say it all the time to the kids. It's like, you played 2, maybe next game, shoot for 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. All right. And I was like, would you be happy if you doubled your playing time in the next game? And they'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to play just 4. It's like, no, you have no control. Like, if you could possibly double your playing time and get to 4 minutes, you have more opportunities to show what you can do. You have more opportunities to, contribute to the team. And so I think that's like the biggest thing is having the conversation with them and then making them realize that in no world are you just going to jump into having the minutes that you want or you think you deserve. Even if you might deserve it and you might, going against what the coach is thinking, oh, I should be playing 12 to 15. Well, that's great. But at the end of the day, you thinking that you should play doesn't do anything. And so it's like, what are we going to do about it? And then what mindset are we going to take to try and like improve it?
You just reminded me of a coach who I know who he would purposely use the time. He would say instead of playing time, he'd always call it playing opportunities, telling his players like, all right, you got like 4 minutes of playing opportunities. Like, what are you going to do with those opportunities that you have on the court? And that kind of like ties in exactly with what you said. Like 2 minutes, it's like, there's, 2 minutes that those are important. Every minute counts, every second counts, and making the most of that. And I 100% agree with what you said about, players sometimes can think that that transition from game 1 to game 2, they're going to play like all this much more. We talk about how players, they improve and they think they should get more playing time, right? But then the other players are also improving. So kind of have that balancing act, right? Where their players are everyone should be getting better. So,
Yeah. And one of the things that, and we tried it out this year with a program, but like, so I do the JV team as well. I'm the head coach for the JV team. And so one thing, we had a really talented group of kids. We had 14 kids on the JV team. And one of the things we did the first 6 or 7 games, I told everyone day 1 to practice, I was like, everyone is going to get the exact same minutes. It doesn't matter if you're the best player on the JV team or if you're number 14. We're doing 2 teams of 7. This team plays the first quarter. This team plays the second. This team plays the third. This team plays the fourth. I don't care about my JV record. It doesn't matter. I was like, let's improve as like players and as teams.
Yep.
And we did that. And it was, I liked it. I mean, it definitely was a little tough because you want your, best players out there when, you're trying to win the game and stuff. But I think it definitely showed me a little bit of like the players buying in more when they realize that they are going to get the minutes, where they're not wondering like, oh, am I going to play? Am I not going to play tonight? It's like, no, I'm playing. So I have to be locked in. I have to focus in practice.
Yeah.
I have to know what's going on because I'm going to get the opportunity. So there's definitely something to it.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. I like that. And I always like hearing when freshmen or JV coaches value the development of players more than, trying to win by any means necessary. I think that's super important as well. Let's talk about your best players. So you have that best player and they need to, move up to whatever their level is of greatness. And one of the things we know that can be a little difficult with that is that their expectations are going to be at a higher level than anyone else. They're going to be expected to do things that, other players aren't going to do. So when you have that player who is like maybe your standout best player, what are some things that you would expect for that particular player that they would need to do and hold themselves accountable to take their game to whatever their ceiling of greatness is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, just, I think number one, the biggest thing, at least in my experience, is getting them to focus on defense. That we talked earlier about coming, from college to high school, and kids don't realize there are so many kids in the country that score 25 points a game in high school. So you going out there and scoring 25 points a game just because the local newspaper is writing you up and just because you're kind of blowing up locally and people are talking about you, it doesn't really mean that like there's something separating you from the other kid that's in the next state over. And so for me, I think the greatest player on your team, meaning the kid who maybe scores the most points or they have to be the best defender on your team. I don't care if you play a zone. I don't care if you play a man. They have to be the best defender. They have to be able to guard, and they have to be able to be a smart defender and learn that. Because if they're not going to have any chance of playing at the next level because they're going to walk in and be in a gym full of other kids who scored 20 points. And if they can't guard, they're not going to play. So for me, it's like making sure that they buy in defensively. And these days with how middle school programs and AAU is run and stuff like that, that they most likely when they come in as a 13, 14-year-old, they might not have played man very much or maybe not even at all. And so for us at prep, we play man-to-man. Like we'll wrinkle in zone, but we play man-to-man. And so man-to-man defense is the first focus. And then the second thing is like all the other stuff besides points. I think I think there's too much of an emphasis, especially on kids, about like the points. And I get it. You score points. That's how you kind of get recognized as a player and stuff like that. And that's what goes on your highlight reel. Like no one's putting their charges or their right. And so I think defensively it's big. And then I think the other thing is like they need to be able to be a leader, but find out how to be a leader in their own way. It doesn't need to be a vocal. If you're not a vocal kid, then don't try to be. You don't have to try to be a vocal leader, but you need to find out how to be a leader in some way. Because if you're going to play at the next level, you need to have some sort of leadership style, or at least know what you're comfortable doing and not doing as a leader, so that you're able to move on like to the next level and advance and like grow as a player and as a person. Because the ball stops bouncing at some point for everybody. And you need to kind of use athletics and use sports and use basketball as a way to figure out, okay, this is like kind of who I'm growing into, who I'm maturing into as a young man or a young woman. And that's kind of the most important thing.
Okay. So I've had a couple guests on before talking about defense, and I'm curious because you brought that up about going from like good to great, about especially on the defensive end. In your experience, how much of that for a player to get better, how much of it is just like mentally, just like locking in where like they know what they need to do, they just actually got to like commit themselves to doing it, versus all they maybe have done is played zone, or they are literally lacking the skills and need to be taught the skills of how to be a good defender. In your experience, what have you kind of figured out in regards to that?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat when I answer this question. I'm going to say
Go
both.
for it. All right. Oh, that's
Because,
perfectly fine.
yeah. So for me, I think it's definitely a mixture. So obviously, if a kid has gone through, the grassroots program and they arrive as a freshman and they've really never played man-to-man defense, then you can't expect them to know how to play man-to-man defense the proper way. And so you're going to have to teach it. But it's also, I think, our jobs as coaches. We talk too much. We do too much talking during practice. We do too much stopping during practice. We want to correct like every little thing. I do it all the time, and I'm constantly trying to get better at it. But I think we need to allow them to make mistakes. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with like the grassroots program is that, it's either, volunteer coaches who are, they stop every time there's a mistake, or they don't want anybody to make mistakes. So that's why they sit in the zone. All right, let's sit in the 2-3 zone because I don't want to try and, teach man-to-man defense. And in that way, that we can kind of just focus on trying to win and stuff like that. And that's fine. But I think that, hinders the development and the growth of players once they get to our level. We can't do anything about that unless you start coaching at that level. So for me, once they get to us, I think it's really important if you're a man-to-man coach, is you have to put an emphasis on that. You have to build skills or drills, that are going to build the type of defense that you want. And then when you're doing that, you have to allow for actual learning and for failure, because that's the only thing. If we went on a court right now and you gave me 30 minutes to teach man-to-man defense and we'd set up one drill and I stopped the drill every time someone made a mistake on defense, the kids would be playing for probably 2.5 minutes. Right. Yeah. And that's the mistake we made. Nobody learned anything. All I did was just spew stuff at the kids. The kids probably heard me. If they're somebody who's an audible learner, then they'll learn, they'll maybe soak it in. If there's someone who's visual, they probably were thinking about 10 other things than whatever I was saying. So for me, it's, you get 30 minutes in the gym, you should be talking for like 90 seconds, and you need to let the kids make mistakes, get scored on. That's the best teacher. You want to get better at defense, get scored on and keep getting scored on. Then you're gonna learn. And obviously, that's a drastic example, but I think for me, like, I use this. I think we all use it, but I use this. It's like fix, guide, or follow method in my practice. And when I make practice plans, like all of my drills are labeled as those 3 things. And it just helps me with that idea. Like if there's a drill where it's labeled as fix, it means that we can stop and we can fix it. And we want to make sure that we correct errors. And that's usually saved for like new drills that we haven't done before or new concepts that we haven't worked on before. Then the stuff that's labeled as guide, it means that we want to, if it's a 12-minute drill, I'll literally write in the practice plan, you can only stop it 4 times. So you better pick your 4 opportunities to stop and teach it when you can, but you're only doing it 4 times, and then you're letting them play the rest of it out. And then the follow one is you're not allowed. I don't stop it at all. It's player coach. So if there's a mistake, the players have to recognize the mistake and they have to fix it. And I think that has a tangible relationship with getting a player from that good to great, because they have to do it themselves. That's how learning is done. It's not done by us as coaches stopping them and telling them what to do. Obviously that would help using film and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if they want to get to the great part, they need to be able to self-correct and self-regulate and do it themselves on their own.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things I know I am still like learning and going through as a coach, is that sort of release and letting them self-correct. You're letting them kind of struggle a little bit as well. I know I've had conversations before in previous episodes about coaches who, have had to work on that as well, because, you have that perfect practice. Everything looks great. Everything looks smooth. So you think you're doing a really good job, but if players aren't making mistakes, then I don't know how much learning is sometimes happening. You want them to make mistakes, but also at the same time, like you said, you don't necessarily want to keep stopping them all the time, because how much actual experience are they getting at that point? So I totally understand that. And you talked about the self-correction part is a really great way. And I agree, of getting a player to be good from good to great. Are there any particular like drills that you also like, or drills that you think are really good ones to kind of get your players, even if they're struggling through them, to kind of push them to get to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, there might not necessarily be any drills, like specific drills that would do it. I think it's the way that you approach the drills that you implement in your practices. So if you make, like for me, and this is just my personal, my personal opinion, but besides some of the warm-up stuff that I would do at a practice, like, or besides maybe some of the skill development, if that's what we're doing in that practice, every single thing that we do is a competition, and we keep score. And it's not basketball score where like, all right, every time the ball goes in the hoop, it's a point. We put different points on different situations. Like, so if you score, it's a point, but if you hit, if we're working on our pick and roll and lift in practice, what I'll do is I'll say, listen, it's a point if we score off the pick and roll, that's great. But if we're trying to hit the lift guy behind it, it's 3 points if we get a score off that, if we make the right read, or it's 2 points if we hit the roll guy and make the right read. And so now they're like, in their head, they're strategically, okay, we're trying to hit this guy, or we're trying to hit the lift guy, but if it's not open, we can still, score and make the point. We'll do the same thing on defense. So I'll do charges are 2 points, but it will be like if it's a correct rotation and a strong closeout and we don't give up an open three, it's a point. So now it's like they're, yeah. And so what I think, and this is, I just kind of started doing it like recently. But I think what it does is it alleviates me from having to stop and coach, because what will happen is, we'll do the pick and roll and the guy who lifts was open and the kid takes a jump shot instead. And the kid who lifted goes over to the kid who came off the pick and goes, hey, I'm the lift guy. I was wide open. We could have had 3 points right there. Well, now all of a sudden I didn't stop it. They just coached each other, and they're the ones who are going to be out there in the game anyway. So now they've communicated with one another, and hopefully now the next time, because another kid said it, they'll be able to do that. And it's the same thing on defense. They'll, if we're working on screen coverage, we'll say, all right, we're going to work on, these two things. And if you do this, it's 1 point. If you do this, it's 1 point. But if you do the other thing, you're getting minus a point. So if you switch when we're not switching, it's minus a point. All right. And then so what they'll do is, if they lose the point after the possession, right, they huddle up and they'll say, hey, we're not supposed to switch. You just lost a point because we switched. So it's kind of a way for them to like self-correct each other and still make it like into a competition where they're really engaged.
Well, one of the things too that I think really is helpful with that is that it helps them keep track of like all of the things that they're trying to work on or trying to accomplish, because then like they recall all the things about switching on screens or all the different things that they need to be doing, and they understand that, okay, here was the positive outcome from this, or here was the negative outcome by not doing it. So in a way, it also seems like all the players have to kind of know all of those situations that involve, points in some way. And there's a lot of self-correction, and I'm sure your players are really competitive and they can sort of get after each other. And for you, like, you can just sort of watch it unfold, and you don't have to really stop practice that much, right?
Right. No, yeah, I think it's good. And you can use it. I've used it for like the most minute things in the world. Like we were doing just the other day in AAU practice, we're working on like our screens and our pick and roll game. And the one thing that the kids don't do a really good job of, like anyone, whether it's my most skilled to my least skilled, is we don't set the pick and roll up the right way. We don't get on level. We don't set it up. And so one of the things I got from a coaching buddy of mine this summer is set up the screen by either, dribbling away from it, making a pass fake away from it, so you set your defender up, and then go off of it. So what we did was we did a small-sided game, 3-on-3, and if you got a point, if you set the screen up the right way, you got a point if you came off of it and made the right read. And then we wanted to still hit the lift guy because we struggle with that. So if you hit the lift guy and got a 3 off of it, you got 3 points. So instead of just scoring 1 point, you could come out of a possession and have 5 points just from and they're like, let's go. Like, they get pumped when they get it. And then the next person in line, they're like, oh, I got to make sure I set the screen up because I want to at least get that 1 point for my team. And so it kind of gets them to like they start like self-reminding almost when they're in the drill, like, hey, make sure you set the screen up, set the screen up, or if it's on defense, they'll start talking to each other. So it's great. I think it's really cool.
I think that's great, and we always talk about, of course, players not talking enough. We always want them talking more on the court, so it seems to be a great way for that to take place, and just them staying engaged. I think that's awesome. That's really good stuff there. I know we've had experiences like this a lot with players who will come to us and say, like, Coach, what can I do to get better? Like, Coach, what do I need to work on? What do I need to do? When you hear a player say that, what are some things that you think players should be doing or coaches should be telling players that they need to be working on their own individually in order for them to reach their next level of greatness?
Yeah, I mean, I always joke that the first thing I always say when a kid asks me, I just say play. Like, I was like, God forbid you go to the local park and play pickup for like 3 hours on a Saturday. I was like, you just got better from just playing. But, I think the number one thing, it's great to, get shots up on a machine. It's great to work with a trainer one-on-one. Like, I do that. I work with kids one-on-one, and I think that's a great opportunity. But I really think in order for there to be some tangible, like, growth and for it to be worth the money of parents out there, I always tell them, like, find a camp, not the camp that has 300 kids in it and you're not going to get many reps and you're just going to kind of play pickup. Like, those are fun. Like, you should do those with your friends. Find a camp that does one coach, 6 players, 2 hours during the summer for a week. I was like, you'll get the most out of your money's big. Everyone wants to make sure they get, their money's worth with stuff like that. I think that's the best possible way because you get the maximum amount of reps. 6 players allows you to go work your way through 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. Because shooting on a gun is great, but it's not game reps. Working with a trainer 1-on-1 is great. But again, unless your trainer's defending you and really playing defense, you're not learning the reaction of the game. And you're not, that mental part, like the muscle memory and making reads and making mistakes and reading it, you're not getting that if you're going 1-on-0 or 2-on-0. So for me, I think that's something our program does a really good job at with AAU, like our summer camps. We used to have like the big summer camps, but again, COVID kind of woke it up. We couldn't have that many kids last summer, and we started having these camps with just 3 kids in the gym. And we would be looking at each other like, this is great. Like, these kids are getting a bunch of shots up. They're playing. We ended the day with like, a competition and games and stuff. And it was awesome. It's valuable. So for me, it's like trying to find something like that. And then, everyone has 3 or 4 friends that they can just pick up the phone and say, hey, it's the summer, it's a Tuesday, it's nice out, let's go to the park and just play. And if they don't want to play pick up and they want to make sure they're actually working on something, anything that is, small-sided with something taken away as like for games is great. So split the court in half and say that half is out of bounds and we've got to play on this side, and don't just check the ball up at the top of the key, check it up in the corner so that you're used to getting pressure in the corner, like off of a pass. And it's like different stuff like that. So I think those are more tangible, and it's actually, I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but that's kind of, I think that's more valuable to work on than just telling a kid you need to work on, like, oh, you need to get your shots up, or you need to get bigger, or you need to get faster, or you need to get, like, that's all great, but like you could tell that to any freshman who's 15 years old, and they're probably all going to get faster and stronger because they're naturally just going to grow. So let's give them like actual, tangible stuff that they could use and that they could go do and have fun with. And I think it's also, for me, I want to make sure it's something that kids who don't have the resources that other kids have, they can also do. And because some kids don't have the resources to go to basketball camp during the summer, they don't have the resources to pay for a trainer one-on-one or pay for a gym membership. So what can we give kids that they'll have access to, that they can kind of, do on their own without having to, spend money?
No, yeah, I like that a lot. I like the idea, especially if players can just, go out to the park too and just compete out that way. I think there's so much value in that, just going out there and, like we talked about, there's things you can do in a one-on-O setting, but is that game like? Is that competitive? Is that like really simulating what you're actually going to do? And any reps that can do that, especially if it is just going outside and going to play, because cost is pretty cheap for that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Do you want your players looking at their own game film and trying to like grow from that? And if so, like how much time do you want them spending at like looking at their own film and trying to make adjustments and improvements off that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important for kids to watch themselves. Now, what I will say is I don't think there's a lot of value in, and we do it, and like we do it at prep, but I don't think there's a lot of value in sitting the whole team down in a room and watching the game film of the night before, because let's be honest, the kids who played are watching them, and the kids who didn't play, they're looking at the screen, but they're not paying attention because it's not them on the screen. So I think if we want to really dive into film and we want kids to enjoy film, we need to tell them to watch themselves. And then we also need to give kids who aren't in the games opportunities to be able to watch themselves. So I think it's really important if you can to film practices, especially when you're going to scrimmage or go live, because there's the film that the kid can watch. Because I don't think it's fair to tell a kid who doesn't get into the game or only gets, playing time here or there, to expect them to watch the whole film. Like what they're not, and I don't know. I guess you could learn a lot from watching like other players, definitely. And I'm not trying to say like you shouldn't watch other players, but I think we're expecting a lot out of a 15 or 16-year-old to watch one of their best friends play when they just sat on the bench and watched them play again. So let's give them an opportunity to watch themselves. And when they are watching themselves, let's give them something to actually do while they're watching it. Don't just say, "Hey Jake, go watch the film last night and pay attention to like when you were in the game." It's like, okay, well, he's going to maybe go put it on and then put the PlayStation on and play while it's on, and not really pay attention. So one of the things that I like to do is, we have like a little Google sheet that I'll give kids when they're watching film, and it'll have like a rating system. So they'll rate themselves, their performance. They'll rate the team's performance on offense and defense. And then there's like two questions, short answer questions, where they have to actually type in the timestamp of two really good offensive possessions and two really good defensive possessions.
I like that.
And so, that tells me that tells us that they're actually watching the film and not just letting it play while they're doing something else. And I also think it gives them like feedback. It's something that I would really love to try. And, after COVID, like if we can, to have like the kids lead the film sessions, with using the Google Sheets. Like, here's your Google Sheet. All right, show us the 4 clips you got and explain why you picked those and why they were good. And again, that's tying it right back to like making kids good to great. Like that's another way of getting them to, become smarter basketball players, is actually being able to, not just watching the film and saying, oh, that was good. Like, okay, it was good. Explain why it was good. Why did you pick that, out of the whole game? Why did you pick that one as good? And then let them elaborate on it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more focused on that point. I like the idea of them having to explain what made that particular play great, because I think as a coach, and you can speak to this, I think it kind of gives you a lot of insight as to like what your players think like constitutes like good, or when something is executed well, because hopefully most of the time that what they think is good is also what you think is good. But it kind of probably helps you kind of get inside their mind and what they're thinking of too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you explain why and ask why is a lot. Is something I say all the time. And I think, again, as coaches, we kind of, I think a lot of coaches would think if you explain something in film or in practice and the kid asks, well, why? I think a lot of coaches are like, oh, this kid's being a jerk or this kid's being disrespectful. It's like, no, like there's your learning opportunity. Like this kid wants to know why we're doing something. So it's like, don't just brush that off, right? Like let that kid just listen to you, heard what you said, and then wants to know more about what you just said and why you want them to do that. And it's like, that's awesome, because that just means that they're more bought in. So if they can do that in a film session and say, here's like a really good example of us running, this play, and something that we worked on in practice was making sure that we looked for the back door. And, Billy did a really good job of setting up the back door and cutting off of it. And it was a really good pass and really good execution. And that's why I chose it. And so it's like they're tying in everything, and from practice, from the game, and from what you're saying, hopefully, and
Yeah.
that's where like the real learning is going on. And that's where you can know if they're getting it. If a kid goes up there and mutters through it or stutters through it, maybe because he's nervous, but maybe he's having trouble figuring out the why. And so that's somebody that you have to kind of maybe focus a little bit more on and make sure that they're understanding what you're doing and the why of why you're doing it.
Yeah, it's such useful information as a coach. And I think that if we ever shut down a kid when they ask why, that'll be the last time they ever ask why. And
Yep.
then we lose them. And then if they don't get something, they're not going to ask. And then we're going to get more upset at them. And then it's like this vicious cycle where just because we shut them down that first time, now they don't feel like they are allowed to ask questions anymore. And I don't think we want to build environments that are like that at all. Definitely not.
No. And then, or we make, I've made the mistake of like stopping a play and saying like, why'd you do that? And putting them on the spot. And it's like, that just like makes them nervous. It's like, why wouldn't you, if something happens and you stop the play, don't ask them, why did you do that? Because they might not know why they did. Like, ask, all right, what did you see there? Like, what happened on that play? And then if they and make sure that, and this is again like the relationship part of it, but making sure that you're not trying to embarrass them, you're not trying to put them on the spot, you're trying to get a deeper understanding of what they do on the floor so that you can help them. And so I think that that's something that is extremely valuable too, is asking them why, but asking it in the way where they don't feel threatened, they don't feel like you're trying to embarrass them or that they're in trouble, but that you're trying to figure out what they see. And if they say like, I don't know, then you know that kid, where that kid is on like that scale of their understanding of whatever skill you're working on. If they say, I don't know, then that means, all right, well, maybe that kid needs to go back to the fixed portion of those methods, where if he's making a mistake, we got to show him what he needs to do so that he can learn. Whereas if you ask a kid, why do you do that? Well, I saw this happen and this happened. If they have an answer, even if it's the wrong answer, it means they're thinking. So they're on the right track. They're doing something, and they're trying to work their way towards, answering the question the right way and making the right read or doing whatever the skill is. So that's great.
Yeah. And I know a shift for me that and it's been hard, I've really had to work on it, is if a kid says, I don't know, in a way, I put a lot of that on me. Like, okay, if you don't know this, what did I not do? Like, what is there something I didn't do that made it like clear enough for you personally as a player to understand what was going on? Because I think it's so easy, to just assume that they weren't paying attention or there's not bought in or whatever. But part of it might be like, me as a coach, maybe I just didn't communicate to you effectively. And if you don't know something, like, what can I personally do as a coach to help with your level of understanding? And it's hard. I know it's been hard for me to do that, to put it back on me. But no, I like the idea of saying like, what did you see there? Because it sounds a lot more useful, I think, rather than like aggressive to word it that way, at least from the way I look. For sure.
Yeah, it's like caring talk, I guess, is what you say is.
Yeah.
Showing you care about what they're.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Let's talk about mental toughness here, kind of like the mental standpoint. I think one of the things we really will on our players, we really want them to do in order to elevate to that next level is to mentally be kind of tough enough, for a lack of a better term, whether they're going for like a shooting slump or whether there's, things just aren't breaking their way or going that way. Are there things that you as a coach either intentionally do, or conversations that you have, when your players are maybe needing to strengthen their mental or emotional toughness on or off the court?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, there's definitely things as coaches that we can do to like kind of prepare them, during practice, whether it's, making bad calls, making the wrong calls on purpose, when they're like, especially in like the competitions. if I have kids who are very emotional and I think that they need to work on how they react in situations, whether it's positive or negative, I'll purposely call a travel, or I'll purposely like call something when they have the ball just to see how they respond. And then I don't correct it. It's up to one of their teammates. And I'll say something like, if a kid's standing next to me and I know so-and-so gets, a little heated if something negative goes wrong with him, I'll turn to the kid and just say, all right, I'm about to make a bad call on him. Let's see how he reacts. And so I'll make the bad call. And if it's a negative reaction, my hope is the kid doesn't negatively react. But if he does, my hope is that his teammate's going to step up and say, hey, no, we got just chill, calm down. We're good. And they pick each other up. Because again, my biggest thing is I'm not on the court. So I can't help you in that situation. And if I don't have any timeouts, I definitely can't help you in that situation. So I need to rely on the other people in the gym, the ones that are on the floor, to help you with that mental toughness. And so that we do that. I think the biggest, another thing, and it's really hard to get young players to do is huddle up on everything. And it's not like we say, like, coach, huddle. That's great. But what's actually happening, like, in the huddle? Like, are they just putting their arms around them and everyone's looking at each other awkwardly and nothing's said, nothing's done, and they just walk away? Because that's not, like, it looks great from everyone in the crowd, like, oh, wow, they're like locked in. But we need to make sure that the huddle is actually like doing something. So I'll have a drill. I actually have a drill where it's called huddle, where it's rapid fire, like 5-on-5, half court offense versus half court defense. They have to huddle up after every possession. They have to call out a play. They have to say, what read they're looking for. And they have to call out maybe one of the players, like, all right, like, this play is for you. We're trying to get you the ball here and score here. And then they have to go do it. And then if they didn't do it, they got to come back and figure out, if it wasn't successful, then they got to do it again and try to figure out why and fix it on their own. Like, and I won't say anything. I just stand there and I keep score, let the clock run. I'll call fouls and stuff like that. But it's up to them to figure out, like, what to do. And there'll be times where the whole 7 minutes, they might be stuck on one thing and they've got to get through it. If no one's going to stop them, I'm not going to stop the drill and say, and I think the other thing is letting the emotions boil over in practice, because that's the controllable state that we have as coaches. That's where we want, if there's going to be a boil over, that's where we want it to happen, because it's not going to affect the outcome of the game. It's not going to affect anything like that. And it's in-house. And so I joke with my team. I'm like, just think of it this way. I was like, if there's an argument going on in your family, most likely you want that argument to be happening, like, in the house, so that nobody else hears it or sees it or knows what's going on. But if you have your argument in your front yard, all of your neighbors know your business now. All of them know that. So I was like, for us, if, like, we're going to have a mental breakdown, it needs to be, we want it to happen in practice, because then we're the only ones who know that it happens. Because if it happens in the game, now we know, the other team knows, the other fans know, the refs know, everything. Yeah. And so then there's so many things that are out of our control. So I always say that, let it boil over, because that's where you want it to boil over. Don't stop it before it boils over, because then if you stop it before you boil over, there's no learning. You just stopped it, and it's something that's not going to happen during a game. And so let it play out. And then after it's done and everything's settled, evaluate the situation with the kid. Because there's also, and I've had this experience as a teacher, there's no learning that's going to happen when the emotions are that high, either with the coach or with the player, because it's either going to be yelling back and forth or just high testosterone, everything's going crazy. Let it happen, sit for 5 minutes, and then go and talk to the kid. And then you're going to have, like, a learning moment. And it's not, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's not good. We don't, again, hey, why'd you react that way? What happened? Yeah. What's going on in your head? Because again, then they can actually express to you, and it might be maybe it's something you did and you didn't even know you did it. And it just like, true. that was the last thing. And I've had kids say that, like, man, coach, you've been picking on me all practice. Every time I have the ball, like, you call a travel or blah, 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 blah. You're getting on my nerves. And I was like, all right. I was doing that on purpose. That's my bad. I might have done it too many times. I was like, I'm trying to teach you a lesson here. Do you understand that? I understand it. It's just annoying. Okay. Well, let's refocus now. All right. I'm not going to do that anymore today. I'm not going to promise I'm not going to do it ever again. but I'm not going to do it anymore today because I realized that you're in a frustrated state. Let's move on. Let's get better, and then we'll talk about it after practice.
No, that's really interesting. I've never really thought about it that way, about the idea of like, letting things blow over in practice, because that's kind of the controlled environment. I think everyone would rather have it happen there than on the court in the middle of a game. But that takes a lot. I imagine it takes a lot of buy-in, a lot of trust, though, and your players got to trust you and believe in you, that you have their best interest in mind. They got to believe in each other. But once you get to that point where you can do that and let it out like that, and still be able to hug each other at the end of practice or the next day or whatever the case may be, I think that's awesome. And then, as the last parts of that before we hit our concluding segment, when it comes to like leadership, are you looking for leadership to really come in those opportunities from anyone who wants to step up? Or there certain players you've kind of earmarked and you say like, hey, my expectation is your expectation is to be taking charge or taking more of a leadership in these type of situations? How do you kind of determine, like, I guess, leadership and kind of growing that?
Yeah, I think for me, like for JV practices, and then especially in AAU when kids are playing with kids they don't even really know, especially at the start of the season, I think it's really important to I do something where like I have practice captains and they rotate. Yeah. So
okay,
that day it's like this kid is the captain for this team and this kid's the captain for this team and everything that we do. And what that means is, and it's not for every single drill, but what that means is that everyone has to listen to whatever that kid, even if that kid's wrong, even if like we're doing something and the kid says, all right, we're going to play, or, we're going to switch the ball screens on this next play. Even if he's wrong, you have to shut up and listen, and you have to do it, because it's that kid's opportunity to be a leader and because if you correct him, he's never going to speak up the rest of the time. And so it's a teaching moment too. It's like what I always tell them, it's like the quietest person in the room usually is the one that's like the smartest or has the best ideas. They're soaking everything in, right? Or they're, maybe they're shy and they don't want to say anything. I was like, how bad would it be if one of your teammates has a really great idea and has like really high potential and they just need a platform for them to like be able to speak upon it and have the encouragement to do so. And I was like, how bad would you feel if by telling that kid, no, you're wrong, we're not doing that, that you shut that down, not just for like the practice, but maybe for like that kid's whole high school career, or maybe like hopefully not his whole life, but you don't understand, you don't want to do that. So like if that kid is the captain, he's going to talk, you're going to listen. And sometimes, kids embrace it. Sometimes they're just really, really shy and they don't do it. And you have to kind of pull it out of them, but it's not me doing the pulling out, which is my hope, is if we have the really quiet kid as the captain, the leader who's like the natural leader in the huddle is going to be like, hey, all right, what are we doing? What are we doing here? And then that kind of opens the door for the conversation. And so that's like one of the things we do, especially, at the JV level when the kids are younger. And then with AAU, it's very important because these kids don't play with each other, at all. They might not even know each other. And so it's important not just for them as a team and for like the team standpoint, but it's a life lesson. It's important for them to be able to carry that on and work with other kids who are different. And I think it really helps build that bond and that like competitive spirit and that family and that trust atmosphere, especially at the AAU level, because that's really what you want.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's really well put. And I really like the idea of empowering your players, especially those ones who are more on the quieter side, because like you said, they're the ones kind of soaking everything in. And if you just give them a platform, like you said, you'll be surprised, and their players and their teammates will be surprised at, how much they have to contribute themselves. So I like that you mentioned that for sure. Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest, starting with this first one. What is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
That's a good one. So I had a couple that I could think of off the top of my head, but I would say I'll go to this season, and it's not a negative thing it was a really positive learning experience. We had a kid who I was just like constantly on, all the time about with the effort, a very skilled player, like really high potential, but just like I felt like the motor wasn't there, the motivation wasn't there. I had a really hard time like connecting. I had a really hard time, trying to get him to buy into like everything and to buy in with the team, to buy in with the competition and stuff. And it was like it was frustrating for me. I'm sure I know it was like frustrating for the kid. And then when we had our end of the year meetings, we had a conversation, about the season or whatever. And I didn't realize why. I knew that the kid had an injury prior to the season, and he started talking about how he just is constantly worrying about re-injuring himself and like having the injury come back. And he like said that, and it honestly, it was like a gut punch to me in the meeting, because I was like, I didn't even think of that. Like I didn't even think to ask the kid about like the injury, because it was all the way from the prior season and stuff. And he came in and he was playing right away. So for me, I just kind of thought he was fine. And it really opened my eyes to like the mental health aspect of it, and like how serious something like that can like really get into someone's head. And they were saying how like it affected the way, how much effort they put in, the way they kind of came every day to practice. They would, for me, we'd start practice and we're in the first drill, and the kids on the sideline stretching for 10 more minutes, and I'd go over to the assistant and go, there we go, not in the drill again, not in the drill, doesn't want to do. And then at the end, I'm like, wow, like he was just really worried about it, and here I am like making a big deal out of it, and not checking in. And so for me, that was really eye-opening. It was a really eye-opening experience, and it definitely gave me a piece of humble pie, realizing that like I need to make sure that, if I am struggling with like that connection, or if any coach is struggling with the connection, try to dig a little bit deeper. And if you can't, like maybe reach out to somebody else, and see, because I wish if I had known, practice number 2, that was going on, the way the relationship was built probably would have been a lot different. And so that was something that I made a mistake on, and I'm glad I'm sad that I did it, but I'm glad that it happened, because it definitely is going to help, later on with, if that comes up again, or just in general.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing it, because sometimes those times of growth or repairing those relationships does take a kind of a gut punch, or a real slap in the face there. That's pretty tough to swallow. But I'm glad that that's something you shared, because I think it is really important that as coaches we really examine relationships we have with our players, and if it's not going well, we have to be able to open ourselves up to hearing some honest truths perhaps about where the relationship kind of fell apart, and things that we can grow from. So I appreciate that you shared that.
And
go ahead.
And then the last, not to interrupt you, but the last thing I would say is definitely to swallow that piece of humble pie, and also acknowledge that you made that mistake and apologize.
Yeah,
because that was something that I did that I thought was really important, moving forward, because everyone's human, we're all going to make mistakes, but just because I'm the coach and the kid's a kid doesn't mean that I should just be like, oh, I made a mistake, but I don't need to apologize to the kid. I'm the adult here. It's like, no, I apologized. I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think of that. This is what I should have done. And I'm hoping that is the foundation of like the next chapter of like our relationship, going forward. And so, yeah.
No, I'm glad you put that. I'm glad you said that part, because I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of teacher candidates, especially those in college. And one of the things I try to tell them is that it's okay to apologize. And a lot of kids don't hear adults apologize. And I think it's really good to model that, so that they become adults that will know that it's okay to apologize, especially to, kids or teenagers. And it's really helpful, and kids will forgive you. And I think they'll have a lot more respect for you if you do give that sincere apology. So no, thank you for bringing that point up, Coach. And to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's your platform to give out your final thought, your closing message, your closing idea that you want to leave the listeners with, Coach. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, and you can go and take it away.
All right. Well, I don't believe I know nearly anything at all, but what I will say, and this is just because it's going on right now, is if you are an AAU coach, doesn't matter the level, it doesn't matter girls, boys, please play man-to-man defense. Please run some type of 4-out or 5-out motion offense and stick to those guns. Do not spend the 3 hours or 5 hours you have in practice implementing the flex offense, implementing all these different sets, and then sit in the 2-3 zone, because it's not going to help anybody. And AAU was founded to help kids develop and go to college. It was not founded to win every single weekend and win championships, and AAU records do not go on resumes. That's all I got.
I'm going to just leave it right there because there's nothing I can add to that. So well said. Coach Hickey, I want to thank you for spending some time sharing some knowledge about getting good players to great basketball, your practice plans, drills that you do, all that good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in that conversation. So best of luck going forward. It looks like we're, fingers crossed, knock on wood, getting through all the COVID stuff. So hopefully you have a nice normal season and get back in the swing of things next year. Thanks a lot, Coach.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Coach. I appreciate it.
And thank you to all of you who are listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.